You are watching Wide Field with Vivian Birchall. This is Wide Field.
Welcome to the show. I'm Vivian Birchall, your host, and with me is a group of youth who are children of first-generation immigrants from Africa. I would like to invite each and every one of you to please introduce yourselves, your name, where you live and go to school, and we'll take it from there. Let's start with Keenan.
Hi everybody, my name's Keenan. I'm 22 years old and I live in Plymouth. I'm also a first generation Kenyan.
All right, then we can go to Nazra.
Hi, I'm Nasra. I go to the AV, Acton-Bobxborough Regional High School, and I'm going into senior year.
All right, McKenna.
I'm McKenna. I live in Acton, so I go to Acton-Bobxborough Regional High School. I'm 17, and I'm going into senior year as well, and my parents are both Kenyan.
All right, and David.
I am a U.S. Lowell student. I'm going to my sophomore year this fall, and I'll be 19.
Song.
Hi, I'm Song. I am a graduated senior at Acton-Bobxborough Regional High School, and my parents are Ghanaian immigrants.
All right, and Kubura.
Hi, I'm Kubora. Most people call me Kubi. I am going to be a junior next year at Acton-Bobxborough Regional High School.
My name is Katelu Bega, and I graduated from AB in 2019.
All right, and finally, Eden.
Hi, I'm Eden. I'm 17 years old, and I just graduated from Acton-Bobxborough Regional High School, and I'll be going to Simmons next year.
Well, congratulations to those of you who have graduated, and to every one of you. We're thankful to have you here. We're humbled to be able to listen to you. We need to hear these voices. And to our viewers, our youth are going to be sharing their experiences with bias and how it affects them and how the community can help be a part of this change. I will give each of you a minute to just talk about how you've experienced bias in our communities and how it has made you feel. Let's start with Keenan.
Yeah, so biases affect me in a lot of ways from my experience. So I'm 22, I graduated in 2019. And I think that one thing that we all share is uncertainty, especially in these times. And from moving forward after graduating, I've learned that uncertainty kind of grows with the things that happen around us. And from my year being unemployed, I've been looking for work in my industry. And the main bias that I experience is that they say that I lack experience. However, I've been making videos for 2 years and I've been in the industry for 10. I find that not to be the case. So I feel that the bias that I experience at first might be experienced, but it might also be racial with undertones. And I hope that if we were going to make change, it needs to be from the ground up as far as boards. So,
and what industry is that?
Video production and marketing.
All right. And McKenna?
Yeah, so mine is just like in a lot of like small ways. So I'm involved in different things at school. So like I'm on like the tennis team. So when I'll tell someone like, oh yeah, I play tennis, they're like, oh, like I wasn't really like expecting that or something, because it's just like not something that I think it's usually like majority like white people that play this sport. Or like I'll do like something with theater and it'll just kind of be like a lot of like weird undertones, or like I'll be the only person that like does it, or there'll be like two people of color and we're just kind of like together in it. And a lot of people will like have a lot of weird reactions when I first like tell them about it or something. But when I'm like, oh, I did track for a season, they're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Like that's normal. That's what you're supposed to be doing. So it's like a lot of weird things that people just kind of assume I'm supposed to be interested in one thing.
Nasra?
So I'm involved in radio production, and I do the announcements at my school. And I guess the bias I have is the fact that I sound white. I don't sound the way I look, per se. I've told people, oh, I'm that girl who says the announcements, and they're like, oh, you? Like, I wouldn't expect that. Like, you don't sound the way you look, which is a bit like, what did you expect? Like, how am I supposed to sound, kind of thing. So that's kind of one of the biases I suffer at school.
We'll go to David.
So my personal experience with racial bias is in my hometown when I first got my license at 16 and a half until like when I moved out when I was 18. I've been pulled over like more than 15 times. And granted, like a few of those times were for speeding, sure, like a couple times. But I was never given the ticket. I was only given one warning out of those times. And other times were there. My motives were questioned. I was looked at differently. Like people questioned where I was, why I was there. It's because I was a minority in my town, so they thought it made sense, but they kind of made up like reasons to stop me. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
I think much like McKenna, from the time I moved to Acton-Bobxborough, from more like a more diverse city, we started playing ice hockey here. And I think that was where I experienced the most bias because me and my sister, like we're two Black girls. We moved here in 6th grade. No one really knew us. We were both the only kids of color in our elementary school grade. So when we walk in and people were just not expecting us, one, to be good. So it was tryouts. They weren't even watching us. They were just assuming, oh, this is the category I'm going to put you in. And then basing our team, whatever team we got on off of that, we didn't really have the opportunity to prove ourselves. I think that was the biggest thing for me, honestly, because it's so obvious some of the things that are different when it comes to them picking teams and the politics within like who gets to play on the ice, who gets to go to this tournament, and so forth. And it was never us who were being picked, even though our coaches would be like, wow, you look really good out there, like good job in the front. And then in the back, when it was the actual opportunities that were gonna push us forward, we were never given a chance. So
Kubi?
I would say in like definitely what Song said for ice hockey, because that is a white majority sport. We've definitely faced a lot of bias there. And I also play field hockey, which is a similar situation. But I'd say also at school, I take a lot of high-level classes. I take many honors classes, and this is from both teachers and students. I don't think a lot of people think I belong there, and I think like what Nazira said, people are surprised, or what McKenna said, people are surprised that I'm even in that class. A lot of kids don't want me in their group because they don't think that I'm capable of doing the work assigned. And when I am in a group, sometimes they don't even let me do anything because they think that will mess it up, because they just don't think that intellectually I should be in that class or that level.
What class was that again?
Just my various honors classes. Specifically honors chem was pretty tough this year. So
Eden?
Definitely going off of Kubi's point, the most bias that I faced was definitely in terms of academics. Whereas like I would be in AP Lit, for example, and I would be in a group and people wouldn't want to hear my contributions, or they'd shut them down quickly because, of course I'm Black, and they just didn't really seem to take anything that I said seriously, or they'd laugh it off, for example. And I didn't really think that was fair. And also, in terms of Nazi, what she said, people would treat me like a white girl, or just call me a white girl, for example, call me an Oreo, for example, for sounding articulate or trying to be intellectual. And that was one of the most biased situations that I faced.
I've lived in Massachusetts my whole life, and with that has come several experiences of racial inequality, including segregation, bias, and microaggressions. Living in Massachusetts, I notice how Black people are segregated into certain locations, with the suburbs being fairly inaccessible to a lot of Black people because of this commitment by the towns to limit the development of affordable housing. And I kind of saw that by being the only Black kid in my elementary school. The lack of diversity in Acton had impacts that revealed themselves to me while I was in school. Mainly it was the lack of perspective and understanding that many kids never had the opportunity to learn. And this manifested into microaggressions in school that could be very exhausting to deal with. At times it felt like a lot of students were fascinated by racial stereotypes and fascinating with identifying our differences as black versus white kids. And as a child in middle school and high school, this was something I never wanted to do. I wasn't very interested in pointing out ways in which we were stereotypically different. I would hear racial slurs sometimes, but I would always just avoid those people, so I didn't have to hear that kind of language again, specifically the N-word, which I could tell some people like to use a lot. And in high school, I even had a couple English teachers that used the N-word while I was in class without asking if anyone was okay to that, without asking if anyone was okay with that or sensitive to that. And that definitely confused me because they kind of created their own justification on why they would say the word nigger without discussing with any of the students.
You know, it's harder for a person like me who is a mother also to young children to hear this from you, the youth. I don't even know where to start, but I think I'm just going to open it up to us to talk about how these things make us feel.
Well, personally for me, I feel like the biggest feeling I get is initially is anger, which is sometimes goes onto another bias because people are already expecting me as a black girl, especially because I'm also darker skinned black girl. Everywhere I'm portrayed in like media and television, I'm the angry, crazy black girl, sassy, the word that they're using. So then you get angry, and then people are already expecting you to be like that. So I feel like I don't know what to do sometimes because I'm like, I'm supposed to be, my feelings are valid in the situation. I know I can be angry, but now I have to prevent myself from expressing that because if I express that, then I'm giving into another stereotype. And I think that's also how it connects with the Black Lives Matter movement and it picking up right now with all the protests and everything, because on one hand, I see where the anger is coming from completely from the Black community right now, and well, complete over time, but especially right now is in the heat of things. And I think that I see where the anger is from, but then I'm on the other hand, I'm like with the looting and the destruction of property, by showing that, then I'm like, are we giving into the expectation that they already have for people who look like that? That's where I am right now.
I'd say I'd have to agree, but I'd also want to say that I also feel a lot of disappointment because I feel like these conversations don't really happen a lot at our school. And what I experience at school, I feel like goes right over people's heads because we just don't talk about it. And it's hard for people at school to notice things that aren't blatant racism. No one's coming up to you and calling you the N-word, things that are very like microaggressions, things that are passive. And I'd say how that connects to the Black Lives Matter movement right now for me is that I also feel a lot of disappointment with how certain people in our community have dealt with this, especially like I'd say with the people that I surround myself with. A lot of my friends haven't really spoken out and they've been silent on the topic, which I feel like is just as bad as racism, that silence and not saying anything. So yeah, I'd say disappointment is one of the biggest things for me.
Yeah, I think that it's really interesting to see just how people in like the community are responding, because a lot of times like everything you say to them will like be discounted, and then when like they try to open up a conversation with you because that's what they've been told by their Instagram feed, they're like will still discount it because they're like, oh yeah, well we like live in Acton, like we're relatively like privileged town, like nothing really bad happens here, like we've kind of like solved all of our problems. So even when you're like given a chance to speak and to like voice your own opinions, a lot of times it's still like discounted because they're like, oh, but like it could be worse, which isn't really where we should like be at this point in time. And a lot of times people aren't backing up what they're saying with like actual action, especially now when it's such like a large thing in social media. It's like activism for show half the time, and you can't even tell if it's genuine because they're not even listening to you.
Yeah, I think going off of what McKenna said, I've had even my own teachers even tell me, oh, you're supposed to be knowledgeable in this because you're Black. You should know all this. And I'm like, should I? And it just like, I guess, we've been taught for so long that whites have built on with America, whites have made America what it is when it's really not. And it's like, you don't give us the opportunity to learn about some of these things that we are supposed to know and that are actually true. And it's a bit frustrating, the fact that you try to voice your opinion on something, and all of a sudden, like we kind of said, it's like it's being dismissed, like it doesn't matter. And I guess that's what really frustrates me, because you talk about all these topics and stuff like that, and the minute a person says something, it's like, oh, well, it could be worse, oh, it could be this. And like McKenna said, we're in such a privileged town that people don't think racism here exists, which is really, really sad, because racism exists everywhere. And I've noticed it a lot, at least in our school, like being part of like the 1% Black people in our school. It's like, you don't go through life the same way these people do. You see different things. And then when you try to educate people on, hey, like, this is what I'm seeing different, it's not the same for you, they're like, oh, like, it's okay, you'll get there, it's totally fine, we all see the world differently, and that's okay. But like, the part they're missing is the fact that we go through a more dangerous life through both of them. Like, people don't accept the fact that you are very, very lucky to be like that. They're like, oh, you're just like me, you go through life just like me. And it's like, no, I don't. And it's hard for people to understand the fact that that's not the way I go through life. And then people think, oh, we just want to make ourselves like sad for ourselves, make us feel like, oh, we need to be down upon. Like, no, like, that's not what we're trying to do. So I think that's the frustrating part, is not people understanding what certain things are and how we go through life, and especially with the Black Lives Matter movement, like the meaning of it. Because like McKenna said, I feel like people think this is like what they call a trend. Like, just because what you see on social media, like, you need to keep up and follow up with that trend, so you have to do it. But do you really know what you're doing? Do you really know what this stands for, kind of thing? Which is a bit frustrating, because people think something like this is a trend when it's really not.
Going off of that, I really think that ignorance is one of the most horrible things going on with this movement right now. And I feel like what we can do to reduce that ignorance is to use social media and try to promote things that we could do, like sign petitions, make calls. But the problem with social media is that people are seeing it as performative activism. People aren't actually taking the action behind posting. Like, for example, with the Black Squares, I saw people who had completely trashed Black lives before post a Black Square and thought that they were done. Like, that cannot be the only action that we do. And I feel like it's so important to try and spread education and intelligence to defeat that ignorance.
Yeah, I think we really need to move away from this performative activism that I see like all over social media. I think that's really disruptive towards the actual like Black Lives Matter movement. And it's representative of how people who are white don't really seem to understand how severe Black people have been treated in this country. So when they post a Black picture on Instagram, they think they've done enough. But then 2 days later, they delete the picture thinking that it's been up for long enough people have seen it, I don't have to participate anymore.
When thinking about that, I also think about the fact that, like, in school, we don't learn about modern racism. We don't learn about like racism now. We don't learn about what it's manifested into after slavery and segregation. So I think in a lot of kids' minds, and I think that's when ignorance comes into play a little bit, in a lot of people's minds, it's racism was then, this is now, relax, to Black people. I think that's a big thing I've been hearing, like, guys, do you know how bad it was? It's better now, relax. But not realizing that it's not left, it's not gone anywhere, it's not gotten any better, it's just evolved into a different way that's hiding it. And I think that is one of the main things of why it's so important for the education piece of this, because people are seeing all these things and posting on social media and thinking, oh, I post on social media, everyone around me thinks I'm not racist, I check that box off with my Black friends, I'm good, move on. Instead of thinking, okay, I showed them on social media that I am willing to support them. Now what am I going to step out and do to actually like take it a step forward? And I think that's where.
Yeah, I totally agree with Song. And I've lost friends because of things like that I post, and just like trying to educate people on what Black Lives Matters and modern day racism is like for us Black people here in America. And it's just the ignorance that people have, that they're like, oh, like Song was saying, like, no, that was back then. Like, oh, it's so much better now. Like, it's really not. It's just a different form of racism that's just in modern day time. And it's kind of disgusting. It's not kind of, it is disgusting, the fact that people even like think like that, like think like, oh, even to the fact that racism is even okay, and how some people are like, oh, like whites have always dominated other races, so let's continue that. I just feel like once something has been established, it's for so long, it's so hard to move on from that. And people like tradition. People like the fact that once you have something that's been going on for many years, that's just the way it is throughout the whole rest of history, which is really sad because it shouldn't be like that.
Yeah, I think that the education piece is really important, but also I think who is educating us is also a really big part of that, because obviously we all live in like predominantly white towns. So most of your teachers, like I've never had a teacher of color. My counselor was the only person of color in the entire school, but then she left like last year. So it's pretty much like I've never had another person of color in one of my classes, nor been taught by a person of color. So especially when like, even now as the school is trying to like promote conversations, every conversation starts with, oh, I'm a white man, so obviously I don't know that much about this, but we can have a conversation about it. And then everyone just sits there silently. And then it's like the pressure is almost on you because you're the only person of color in that class. So everything you say is going to be taken like by the class as gospel, even though you don't know everything because you've never actually been fully educated about the topic.
That's a very interesting thing. All of you have brought up things that not many people think about. And that is one of the reasons I, provided this platform, so that we can have this conversation. We've talked about the education component. What are your thoughts on just breaking down the word racism so that people can understand it? If we wanted to break down the word racism, what does it mean?
I think that people often throw around the word prejudice with racism, and people often like misuse them. So oftentimes people would take racism as a white person calling a Black person the N-word. That is not racist, that's being prejudiced. And you're not realizing that racism is the systemic oppression of a class that seems supreme, a race that seems supreme. So if a white person is seeing a bunch of Black people in a park and calls the police, she's being racist towards them because she's using her power and her position in society as a white person to call the cops on a group of Black people. And people don't realize that Black people can't be racist to white people, but Black people can be prejudiced. And I often find that people can misuse those words together.
I think that's a really, really big point, because I think that's where you get into the whole situation between like reverse racism, and I've heard that word like brought up a lot when we have discussions in school. And like I think that whole concept is a concept constructed on top of people not understanding what racism is. We cannot be racist to white people. That's because there's no systematic oppression against white people. But that, I think the idea of like, because it's really easy, and I have done this before, it's really easy to throw around the word that's racist when something makes you feel a certain way based on your skin color. And so, like, for instance, if someone calls me an N-word, like, I've been really quick to be like, that's very racist, when technically it's like like Eden said, it's prejudice, but like, I don't know. Honestly, sometimes I don't really know what word to use, because I think there's a lot of words to describe a lot of different ways Black people are treated in America. So
I'd say you're quick to use the word racism sometimes, I feel like, because that's a word people understand. especially white people, understand, and kids at our school, since we don't get a ton of education about this, or maybe any education about this at school for most people who go to school. When you use the word racism, that's the quickest way you can get someone to understand how you felt. And so that's the word that you're going to pick, even though when racism, personally, I think of it as actually an action, like when, as Eden said, and use that example of a white woman calling the police on a group of Black people in the park or something like that. It's definitely an action, I feel like.
Back to the education component. We have heard many of you talk about the lack of education. It's least in the suburban areas like Acton. McKenna mentioned how when the conversation starts in class, the person begins with, I don't know how you feel, but let's talk about this. And the response is, okay, we'll all be quiet. What are your thoughts on what the communities can do? The schools, let's start with the schools.
I think like we've talked about this before, but just like in having, and like I know Song brought this up like earlier in the year, but just having the schools hire more people of color who can lead these conversations, especially like just within faculty meetings. Like obviously we're students, we're not involved in that, but even just having those people like on the staff that can explain like, hey, even though you guys like obviously don't understand like where we are coming from, this is how you guys can like facilitate a conversation. That way there's also just some sort of education, because if it's white people trying to teach white people about racism and none of them have the actual experience, you're not going to have an actual fruitful discussion in class when you have a bunch of kids that you're trying to lead to have a discussion. But it also just has to be the willingness of the class to like talk to each other and be vulnerable, and it can't be like kind of this like made up like fake conversation that we're having so we can say that we're like a diverse community.
There's so many facts to support racism. Like even in a basic history textbook, you can find a laundry list of events that support that racism is alive. And even in today's events, you can find so many facts that support racism is alive. And I feel like our teachers sharing those with us more and pointing them out as racism gives people of every different color information to have a conversation about racism. If you don't know, like, what are you supposed to say? If you don't have the evidence to prove these things, what are you supposed to say? So I just feel like they have to give us more tools to be able to have those type of conversations.
And to like tackle community issues and tackle like local issues, because I think a lot of times when we're talking about racism, teachers are using examples from like places or cities or states that we all perceive like we're going to put all the blame on racism on these southern states, and up here nothing happens. And like if you search in Google like the most racist city, Boston comes up in the top 3 in the search. I don't think that if you went to any kid in our school and told them that fact, that they would believe you. And that's because we don't talk about it being local. We don't talk about, oh, our mascot is a colonial. What does that mean in general? Like, what does that mean for like what our school represents? But the town doesn't want to have that conversation. And I think that's a big part. They're pushing it off because if they tackle that, then that opens a can of worms for them. But I think that's so beneficial to actually learning about racism when it's in your community. You're tackling it in your community. You're getting examples from around you rather than examples from like 3,000 miles away or 200 years ago, you know?
Yeah, I think just based going off what McKenna and Song said, our school, we have a program that me and Kavi are part of called ADLs, the Anti-Defamation League, which tackles a lot of things like racism, homophobic, transphobic, all these things that happen within our community. And we try to educate the community and mostly just our school just on how to basically certain like things on top of racism, how to discuss them, how do you address them in the most appropriate way. And I think our school, I know our staff had a 2-hour-long training with the Anti-Defamation League about racism, about all these things that were actually hosted by people of color. And I just feel like our school thought just because our staff was trained for 2 hours, like that was just like enough, like you're done, like that's it. When in reality, I really don't think that's the case. I think you need to have more of these trainings with these staff. You need to basically educate your staff more on modern day stuff and racism. And it's a little like sad that our school really thought like because we held a 2-hour long meeting, that's it. Like this training, like that's it, that's everything we need to know. When in reality, it's not all we need to know. And I've known some people in our school, at least one of my teachers was always educating himself on racism and modern day racism, and was kind of able to present a few things to our class about it, like some topics, talking about the civil rights, some hidden things that were in there. So I know like not all teachers are like that in our school, but I feel like more teachers need to understand it's not just like the history department, because I feel like people like rely on the history department to know all these things. Like, oh, you'll just have like the history department tackle that thing, when it's really not. You shouldn't just have that particular department tackle on racism and all these things because they teach history and all of that. I think it's everyone who needs to learn. It's not just them. You need the science, you need the math, you need all that. I don't think you should just focus on one department and make them do everything, which is kind of sad because I feel like that's what our school does. In reality, like you also have the ability to also kind of help us too. Even if you don't know, you can find a way, like try to educate yourself on it. And I feel like the fact that people don't try, it's just the trying part, and just trying to understand something is something that we lack so much of. And I feel like just trying does so much good. The fact that we see you trying gives us a little bit of hope, like if you just don't try, if we are going to think like what's going on here and stuff like that. So that's something that I wish our school did more of, is try and not just say, hey, we said this, we did this, and that's it. Because I'll tell you this, it's not it. There's so much more to go with this than just stopping it at a certain point.
Thank you for sharing that. And back to, still tied into education, I want to get back to you, Kenan. You mentioned the struggles as you're trying to integrate into the workforce. What do you think the school could have done better for you as a Black child, as an African child, to get you prepared for the workforce so that it's easier for you to be relevant and to be called on and integrated into the workforce?
I would say the best thing that my school could have done was offer more mentorship. One thing that my university lacked was guidance. A lot of kids had to go seek that themselves if they wanted help, but a lot of students don't really know what to expect or what questions to ask. So that kind of keeps them away from actually looking for those resources. So I would say making it mandatory for universities or just any educational institution to provide a mentorship for either people of color or any students to find resources so that they can find jobs or what they need accordingly.
David, do you have any thoughts on that?
Actually, yeah, I'm actually currently unemployed right now. And when they're selecting the people to choose to work virtually for the office I was working for, they actually chose the non-people of color to be working there. So I experienced that type of bias there.
What kind of work is that?
I was an administrative assistant in the dean's office. So I was like a secretary, basically just like helping the front line of students who needed help for classes and whatnot. The school advisory board, like the help they needed. But.
Any one of you who thought, yes, Song?
I was, so the school I'm going to next year is Miami University in Oxford, Ohio. And at that school, I got selected for a program that is like all students of color, and we're all science majors, and it's basically a program that helps us, like it gets us internships, talk to like other alumni, lab research, all that stuff. But the thing about that program is that Miami, I applied to 15 schools. Miami's the only school that had that program for a student, and Miami's also the only allows like students with above a certain GPA to be in that. So there's like, out of the Black community of Miami, maybe like 5% of us are actually getting that program, actually getting that exposure. And that was sad to me, because I was thinking, I was like, wow, how many kids who actually could use like this tutoring, all this help, like all these African American kids who need help in the like after college, after undergrad, getting a job, help with all these things. Only 5% of us at one school get it. And that's, I don't know, I found that really sad. And I was hoping that other schools might be inspired by that and start doing it and maybe offering it to all the students or having a way of having different programs for different students. But it's only like the STEM students with the only certain GPA. So it's such a small niche that I'm like, wow, imagine all these other students who could benefit from this.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because earlier this morning I was talking to somebody about how students and schools can help people of color, children of color, many of whom are in very low income households that cannot afford extracurricular studies and activities. For example, in Acton, we have the Russian School of Mathematics, where those who can afford will take their children. So in that, just piggybacking on what you just mentioned about both of you, mentorship and providing that training that children need. What other solutions do you think could be provided by the towns, by the communities, for students of minority groups who have to compete with other well-to-do students?
I think the biggest thing, I'm sorry, I get really excited when I'm talking about this because I think the whole Acton-Bobxborough, the way they do their whole curriculum has to change, because the achievement gap at Acton-Bobxborough is huge. Between the Black students and the other students, the achievement gap is huge. If you look at all our CP1 fundamentals CP classes, those classes are filled with, I would say, 90% of the minority students. And then about 10%, maybe less, are in AE, honors, AP, high level classes. And I think that one is just so sad, because the way the school system works is that once you're in those low level classes, they make it almost impossible for you to climb up in those classes. So once you're in those classes, it causes kind of a loss of motivation, because you're like, as much as I try, I'll always be grouped into this group and I can't do anything to leave that group. And then it also adds to the atmosphere of like bias, because when there are AB kids of color in those high classes, they're treated poorly because people don't expect them to be there. And then also at the same time, if you look at it as from the white or Caucasian kids, they don't get the experience of having kids of color, minorities in their classes. And that also, like, if you don't, people can go through a whole school system, the whole entire, from 7th grade to 12th grade, without having a Black or minority student in their class, and without being friends with a kid of color. And that's I think that's the saddest thing, because then they don't know anything about the experience. The school's not teaching them about racism. They don't have a friend to teach them about how they're feeling, and then that's what brings like ignorance, because they have no idea about anything. So then you can't blame them sometimes, because you're really clueless.
And I'd agree with Song. The minority students are definitely separated from the white students, and just like the atmosphere of school. Like, we have a commons in school called East Commons, and almost all the kids of color hang out there with other kids of color, and the white kids, you will not see them go there, and you hear them make comments about East Commons because they see it
or something.
Yeah, they're scared to walk through, or just so many things get said about East Commons, to the point where like some white kids won't even walk through there, when that's the path that you should take the class. They'll take a longer way. And they see East Commons as such a, like, the people who hang out there so different from them, so separate from like the white majority at school, which I think that's like a huge problem.
This is an eye-opener for me, and I want to hear from all the other AB students who, in the same school system.
Yeah, I think I would say is I've had friends even be like, oh, you hang out with those? Because in our school, a lot of like the Black people, like almost all Black people hang out with each other. Like all of us, we're all in like one big group. And
is there a reason why? Any reason why?
Like, I feel like people don't like us. We think we're intimidating, or we do drugs, or we are bad influences in our school. and which is not true. And it seems like anytime we all can be talking and stuff like that, and I would see a white kid go the other way from someone, and I'm like, why did that happen? Are they intimidated? And we're very nice people. I don't think I would never assume that any of us would be ever mean to someone or just like walking by, just like pick on someone. Like, we don't do that. And it's kind of sad. Even you prove to yourself, like as an individual, that you are nice, you are caring, you're being yourself. And all of a sudden, as soon as you're with a group of Black people, they think very differently of you. Like, they could think that you're a very nice person and stuff like that. Because I remember I was like freshman year, I didn't really have many Black students and Black people to really hang out with. I always had white people. And then towards like my junior year, I started really connecting with my Black people. A bunch of Black people were all coming in at once. And I was like really excited. I was really like excited, like, wow, there are more people like us coming in. And then all my white friends thought I was ditching them to be with my Black friends. But I always had to tell my white friends, like, you guys don't understand. Like, when you're in a conference per se, and you see a person of color, and you say something that triggers all the other white people in the room, I guarantee you 99.9% of the time that Black person will have your back than any other white person in that room. And it's like, you have to tell your friends, like, you are part of the majority. We are part of the minority. And you need to, within that minority, you need to work together. We need to get to know each other. We need to create something, because I feel like sometimes we just feel like we can't make change because all the stuff that's been said about us, we feel self-conscious and stuff like that, which it's so sad to think that we sometimes think that we can't make change in our school because other people think we can. And it's sad, and kind of going based off of levels in our school, like once you're stuck at like the lowest level, like a CP1 class, it's so hard to climb. It's so hard to get up there to where you want to be, but people, even your own teachers, are even setting you back, and they don't think you have potential. And it's so sad.
How do they do that?
It's in a way like, oh, you need to have a certain grade to be in that class, or you need to have I need you to do this and this and this, and then maybe, it's always like maybe you can get up there. Or I feel like you express yourself in a way that I don't think you'll fit in, or something like that. And
there's also racist teachers too that that have been reported, and the school doesn't do anything about them over and over and over and over and over.
Yeah. The teachers are basically in charge of, if you're like, if a teacher has something against you in that subject, like, you're not going anywhere.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I can say, like, I had the prerequisite grade to stay at the level that I was at, and I had to struggle to get there. Even though my grade was there, I should have, like everyone else, it should have been a no-brainer that I would be in that class. And I've had teachers be like, oh, you ask too many questions, so I don't think that you would do good in a class above this because you seem like you're struggling. Asking questions should not be the equivalent to struggling. It's trying to get as much information as you can so you can understand it as much as possible.
Or even teachers who treat you differently in a group setting. I think all of us can attest to this, being in like a group project and seeing the grade that's brought back, and somehow you did the same amount of work as everybody, but somehow your grade is lower. And when you go to ask them why your grade is lower, it's some excuse that you're like, what? Like the kind of excuse that you're like, what? Seriously? Like, you're actually telling me that right now? But you can't say anything, because then sometimes I feel like if you're quick to be like, that's racist, like this is racism, then you can't call it out every time, because people are like, oh, look at her. Every single thing they do to you, it's racist. But then
pulling your race card.
Exactly. And then, but at the same time, you're like, I have to advocate for myself, because how am I going to do the same exact amount of work, the same project as someone else, and get, even if it's 1%, like that's 1% that can change your grade, you know? I don't know. I feel like I see that. I don't know about you guys, but
I also think in terms of like the achievement gap. I don't think it's even just like specifically within school. I think it's also just like the community as itself. Like you're going into like, or like the first time you join a sport or like a club, half of the people have been playing like, I don't know, like club lacrosse since they were like 3 years old. And you're like, you're shelling out thousands of dollars a year. And then when you have someone come from like a lower income background, first of all, you're paying $250 for your activity fee. You're paying like your uniform separately, and every time your team wants to do a psych, like you have to get clothes for that. You're paying just so much money, and everything like adds up. And to some people it might not matter, but like within the school, like they do what they can, and they have like fee waivers, I feel like, because they're like, okay, we're a public school, like we need to make it accessible. But thing is, the school itself can't even do anything because it's just like the way the community is set up, and you have so many like affluent people around that they're paying for everything outside of it, that you're already starting like steps behind if you're like weren't planned out. And if you don't just focus on one thing and just put all of your money into it, like going far in that specific thing, or even like paying for a tutor or something, because like you'll find like half the kids in math like have a tutor, like if, oh, I need help in math, I need a tutor. So sometimes you'll find like someone that's lower income in a lower math level or a lower level of a class, simply because like they can't, like they don't have the money to like pay for a tutor. So they're like, that's not what I'm going to put my money towards, I'll just stay in a lower level class.
So what I'm hearing you guys say that, yes, it's in school, but also the community has created structures, maybe cautiously or unconsciously, that are disadvantaging children of color, and which just ties into what McKenna was just talking about, the tutoring costs. Because if somebody cannot afford, what are the options when they're in school? They're going to just stay in the lower grading because they cannot afford the tutors. And so I'm hearing you say is the community needs to step up and revisit the way things are done within the community, and offer options for struggling children to have a fair advantage as well, and be a part of this development, so that they can get into grades that will make them better, grades that will give them jobs that aren't enough for them to take care of their families and themselves. And so are there any additional thoughts in this, just going back to the community? And while you're thinking about the community, also, can you think of solutions of how the law enforcement can relate with children of color, students of color, or communities of color? Because that has been one thing during the protests, and it will be justice if we at least give them some pointers in this conversation.
I found that the police officers that come to our campus like frequently, they tend to like single out the Black children and like walk around at East Commons. And I just found that it's a little bit offensive, because I feel like people are definitely being targeted. And if police officers made it a way to try and, I don't know, like not do that, people would feel like way more comfortable.
Also, just by the fact that they almost just stand there and don't interact with us, it's almost like their sole purpose is to catch you doing something that you shouldn't be doing, instead of also building a relationship with us, because the schools tells us that they're there to keep us safe. But if someone can't keep you safe if you don't trust them. And just looking at like the ratio of kids of color who get suspended to the ratio of white kids who get suspended, it's really, really, really embarrassing at our school. Like all the kids in East, like putting it simply, like we're all high school students. We're all from like 15 to like 18-year-olds. Everyone in the school, it makes mistakes, does things, talks back to a teacher, does whatever, something throughout their 4 years that they don't like, they're not proud of, and you might get in trouble for. But for me, I think the biggest thing is the same kids are the only kids getting caught, and the kids who are also doing, other kids who are also doing stuff like that and even worse things, aren't getting caught because they're not getting looked at as intensely as the kids of color in our grade, in our school. Because I'm not gonna like sit here and be like they're getting in trouble for no apparent reason, because there's reasons that people are getting in trouble. It's just the rate that they're getting in trouble in, the way that they're being looked over and not able to even make any mistakes as a high school student. And the other kids get to make those mistakes. And even if they do make those mistakes and they get in trouble with their school, their parents can pay for a lawyer, pay for this, pay for that to get them out of those things that the other kids can't get out of. It's sad because it's like, oh, we make it seem like those are the only kids in our community who are doing the bad things, whereas we all have eyes, we all have social media, we all hear the things through school, we all know what other people are doing, except those kids are just at an advantage because they're not getting caught. And if they are getting caught, they're getting out of it because their mom is the secretary at whatever school, or their mom went to college with this teacher or whatever reason, or they can pay for the lawyer or whatever it is, and they can get out of it and the other kids can't.
Yeah, I think it's that, and also just like generally, like obviously like all the law enforcement in our town is like predominantly white, but you need like we need like law enforcement that reflect the people of your community as well. Because if you're only having like white officers, then like obviously like there's just gonna they don't have like interactions with like other Black people that have like Black children that like can voice their concerns and talk about like how the relationship with the police and just like between Black students and like white students is completely different. And also I think that like the blatant like policing of like the Black kids at the school is like very obvious, because before like there wasn't that many like kids of color even like last year, but now I like have a lot more friends because a lot more people came in. And like before I'd be there after school and I did not know who the deans were at this point. Like I would never like see them when with my like white friends, but then like the second I hang out with like my Black friends, they've walked by like 8 times and like everyone knows who they are. And I was like, I didn't even like register before because they just like didn't care. But now you see them out in the hallway a lot, and it's always in like East Common or like the same place, and they don't even try to pretend that it's like something. And especially also when a Black student will say something about like a racial incident, even just like a regular incident that like you as a like faculty should be concerned about, it usually gets discredited or swept under the rug, or like, oh, you overreacted, but like, oh, you reacted to this, so like, but so you're also going to get in trouble, even though like someone didn't start it. And like you're not even looking at like the root cause of the problem. It's always just like, yeah, but you're also going to get in trouble, even though you were trying to protect yourself and you felt threatened. Like you just are not allowed to react the same way that white people are allowed to react.
Yeah, I think going back what Song said about like the police and stuff like that, I've talked to one of like the main police officers at our school, Officer Campbell, and like he's like a really nice guy. And there's also this other officer at our school who, and it just seems like, I understand, like I'm in my school, a lot of people know me. I'm a bit well known in my school, and especially when it comes to staff. And what kind of bugs me a little bit is the fact that when something happens, like a fight happens and it's between Black people, I feel like I'm the more nicer person to approach to figure out some information, that I'm more willing to give out as much information, and then I tell my side and what I think about it, and it's not the information they want. It's not the information that they were expecting or they really wanted, but it also frustrates me in the fact that why am I the person you go to when a fight happens? Like there are so other, and I will not even be there. I will not even be there, and I get called from my classroom to go to talk to the police. I'm like, but I wasn't there. I can't defend my friends because I don't know the situation. And they were like, oh, but I know there's a bunch of rumors and stuff like that. I was like, yeah, but those are just rumors. Those are not accurate. I'm not going to be the person who's going to give you an accurate thing and what you want to hear. And it's a bit frustrating because like anytime I'm with like my friends, especially like towards like end of school, we all like kind of chill out in this like circle outside, and there's always police, but like they fail to interact with us, and they fail to just get to know us, because once you've gotten in trouble by the police once in our school, that is it. They have just this mindset of you like, oh, you a bad kid, that's it, I gotta watch out for you. Like, no, that shouldn't always be the case. And it's a bit like frustrating. It's like you're here to protect us from any danger that was ever to happen. But then again, you fail to even understand us and think that we are the danger that's happening, that's causing our school. And it's like, why? Like, and I guess the fact that they don't try to get to know us, they don't even attempt, even if you've done wrong in our school. It's like, they're like, now the image of you that they have is kind of ingrained and stuck there.
Yeah.
There's no changing that mind. There's no, like, even if you do something good, you're like, oh, it always goes back, but oh, but he did this to this person and they did this. So, like, you gotta watch out for that person. And it's just like, I've heard even conversations, I'm not even gonna lie, I've eavesdropped on some admin conversations that I've heard just might be me being there. And it's just, it's always a specific student. It's always, oh guys, today we're going to look out for this student. Oh, we're going to look out for this student and this student because they've been doing this. Like, and it's like, and it's always the Black kids. It's always the Black kids. I've never seen a white person ever being like, oh, this dean did this to me, treated me unfairly and stuff like that. No, it's always the Black kids, and they single out. And then admin, I feel like admin is there to like help you with your problems, and dean is supposed to help you find a way within that problems. But like, I feel like us Black people in our school, we can't trust those people. When a situation happens, you feel like you have to take care of it yourself. Then when you start taking care of it yourself, you are seen as the problem. But in reality, you feel the admin is a problem because the Black people did not feel like they could go to you to help you with that situation or problem that you had. So it's kind of, you're left to fend for yourself in that school. You're left to stick up for yourself. You advocate for yourself. And all of a sudden you're like, why didn't you just ask? And like, for the amount of times I have asked you, it's like you've done nothing and nothing happens.
So what kind of support system is there for children of color in your schools?
Nothing.
None. Nothing.
Each other.
That is so sad. That is so sad to know, because as a parent, I have, of course, mixed race children, but in the US, they'll be considered Black. And I would definitely want them to have a support system in a school. So if the community was, and I'm really going to share this with with the school superintendent, I will also try to pass on this message to the Acton Police Department, just for them to actually hear the voices of the youth in the town, from this town. And, but if we were to create a support system in the schools, what are some of the proposals? What type of support system would be ideal for students of color in the high schools, Acton-Bobxborough high schools, and any other high school with?
I think first of all, the school needs to like acknowledge the fact that people of color do need a space for themselves. Because like, for example, we had like, I know Eden started like a global student inclusion club, which was like basically like the equivalent of a Black student union, but like they're not allowed to call it that because we were told it's being exclusive to white people, like by not allowing white people to like join it. So it was kind of like a weird thing because the school was like, oh, you can't do that because then like it's exclusive. But I feel like they need to acknowledge the fact that when you go somewhere predominantly white, that you need a space of your own as well. So yeah, they like started that this year. It's not like completely like, yeah.
Yeah, I think going off of like what McKenna said is something that really frustrated me, the fact that we weren't allowed to have a safe place for us Black people to talk, because like we said, we make up the minority, and all these other people, all these white people don't have all their clubs, like 99% of the clubs are almost either all white or all Asian. And it's kind of sad because knowing us, we kind of, I don't want to say we suffer the most, but we suffer a lot more than they do. And sometimes we can't just like open up and just be like, oh, this is what's going on, because you don't feel like people have like, can't like back you up on it, or you feel like you you won't
Your best
feel
interest.
outcasted.
Yeah, and I'd say definitely more like Black, not only Black teachers, but Black counselors, also someone that you can go to. And having Black representation on the administration is so important because I feel like a lot of people's anger fuels from the fact that you don't feel like the admin have your best interests at heart at all. I think Nazira, she described this, that you feel like they're just trying to always catch you doing something wrong. So having that Black representation just makes you know, like, these people have my best interests at heart because I have someone who will hear my voice.
And I also think that the school just needs to make it easier for us to actually have if we have a complaint, to be able to say it and not feel like every single time like we're like
children.
Yeah, exactly, we're a burden, and that we have to keep on repeating it because like our Acton-Bobxborough, we don't have any representation, not in the counseling office, not from teachers, not in the administration. And so the only comfort that we can get of people who are like, I understand what you're going through, is each other. We have to go to each other and be like, bro, like, this happened to me today. Then they'll tell you a story and how they dealt with it. And then you can like get through it together. But we have no place to do that. And I didn't actually know about the Black Student Union thing because I was wondering why it wasn't called that. But that's funny to me because the school always starts, and that's another thing. They always start with saying, no, we can't do this for this reason. And then you have to do something drastic, something a little bit over the edge, something a little crazy for them to be like, okay. Well, when it should have been like from the beginning, like the theater kids have an office that they call the PC office. I don't go in the PC office because I don't do PC. So I don't know why it's such a big thing to have like a place where, oh, the Black students can go and like have that safe space, have that connection to other Black students. And like all Black students can have that connection, because personally I'm not really close with the kids in East because I just didn't really know them when I came in. And it's not that I didn't make an effort, they didn't make an effort. It was just like we just didn't really. I had like hockey and all my sports and stuff and friends from my elementary school. So I didn't really get to know them the way that I would have wanted to and be a resource for them the way I would have wanted to be, and then be a resource for me the same way, and just have those connections, like you can help each other with stuff. And I think that's why it would be so good to have like a place where we can all have comfort together. But
there is one thing that you mentioned. I mean, you've been talking about going to administration, like to raise some concerns, but at the start of this conversation, Song, you talked about not wanting to fit into the stereotype of an angry Black girl or Black child, and sometimes I worry about that as well.
yeah.
And because we as Africans do not shy away from speaking our mind sometimes. And has any of you got in trouble for that? Because and how, what would you want to communicate to the community to explain that doesn't mean that the Black woman or Black man is just notoriously an angry person, but that's just I don't know what
some of the wording that they use, like sassy to describe, like, oh, you're so ratchet, you're so ghetto, haha, you're sassy, this, that. All those things that they think are funny are subconscious ways to be like, calm down, you're being too much right now. And I think that's it's hard, it's difficult, because I'm like, she was just over here screaming. I'm sitting over here talking about something that actually matters, but I'm the one who, my teacher's like, Song, you're so loud. If you ask, actually, I guarantee you, if you go to the school and ask any of my teachers, the first thing they're going to tell you is she's loud. That's the first defining feature that they're going to tell you. And it's just because I'm loud because I say what I want to say. If I see something's wrong, I'll say that it's wrong. And that my voice just sounds different than all the other kids. They all blend together. My voice is different. So then I'm loud. Song's loud. Song's crazy. Song's
they
sassy.
love to use the word intense, which that's just if we're being honest, that's definitely a cover for the word ghetto or ratchet or any other thing. It's just a new way of saying those things that are politically correct. I've had teachers say to my face that my mom's intense, and I'm like, how do you expect me to take that? They might not even understand what they're saying. And I think that they also have to see where frustration fuels from. We experience these little things every single day and they add up on top of each other. So by the time we're expressing ourselves, like there is gonna be some anger in our voice.
Yeah, I've had to stick up for a couple of my friends because people are like, oh, why does she gotta be so loud? Like, why does she gotta be like this? I'm like, but do you not understand that that's just her voice? And you don't see the frustration where she's coming from. Because I've even been told myself that one of my teachers has always told me, I've had her for almost 4 years in my high school career, and she's always told me, oh, you're very loud, like, I think you need to tone it down. But when I'm frustrated, what makes me frustrated is the fact that you say I'm loud, and then when I'm quiet, I'm too quiet. Okay, and then I'm too loud. Like, which way do you want it to be? You can't have it any other way. And it's just like, it's frustrating because me and my friend, me and my black friend, we can be talking just normally, and all of a sudden, when my teacher's trying to help someone, we're seen as, oh, we're too loud, or go to the hallway and go talk in the commons because that's where you're supposed to be to go talk loud. Like, it's like, but we weren't even talking loud. And sometimes it's like you have to, you try to make them understand that, like, no, like, we're not mad, we're not upset. And then all of a sudden you're saying like, well, I'm not loud, I'm talking. And
being aggressive.
No, you're not. I'm like, well, you're being, and I'm like, just quiet down. Or they're like, to the point where they get so frustrated, they're like, just don't talk at all. And I'm like,
yeah,
no, that's not happening. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and I think just like the problem is like, why should I have to educate you that I have feelings? Like, I'm still like, why should it be my job to like police myself when something obviously is like making me upset? And then you're like, oh, like, it's just like you're overreacting. Like, can you like calm down? I'm like, no, like I have feelings. When you're angry, you get to like express the fact that you're angry. I shouldn't have to first teach you that I have feelings and then you tell me how to express my feelings, because that's just not how it works. And it's like sometimes you find that you've like built up and like internalized things for so long that it's almost like just detrimental to you as a human being, and you have to like separate yourself from certain spaces because you're like, I just physically cannot like explain anything here and no one's listening to me.
And
I agree with that 100%.
Oh, yes, Eden.
Oh, I agree with that 100%. I feel like that stereotype just like, I don't think we should try to debunk it at all, like, because people are going to think what they want to think. And the more that we try to like defeat that stereotype, I feel like we're encouraging compliance and silence. And I feel like the more that we express ourselves, the better. So honestly, that stereotype, I think that we should just honestly try and ignore it because people are going to think what they want to think. And I think that we should just try to be our authentic selves and express ourselves whenever we see fit.
And call it out. I think that you need to call it out sometimes.
But then when you call it out,
I would love to hear the guys' perspectives when it comes to voices and communication. What has been your experience?
I think it is very important to have those conversations because it is pretty tough to bring up race every single time something offends you, because if you're in a predominantly white community, then like it's going to happen a lot regardless. It's a part of it. And to have those conversations is the only way to actually change that and change people's opinions on different topics. Mm-hmm. So bringing those to light is something that we need to do. Brings like more attention to the cause, I guess, without kind of like coming off as like being angry or bitter towards it, because some people just don't know, like they don't know any better because of like they don't really have the experience with other people of color. So it's being open-minded is like the first step to really helping bring that conversation to the table.
Yeah, I agree. I think we can't be afraid of having like conversations or even arguments, because like as soon as we do that, we lose the momentum in like our movements and our points that we're trying to make. So don't be afraid of those stereotypes. Keep pushing that needle.
Yeah, I mean, I am, first of all, very, very excited that we are having this conversation. These are raw feelings. This is something that our community, these are some of the voices that our community needs to listen to hear, to understand, because we are in this for the long haul. People have homes here now. They are going to work in these same communities in Massachusetts or the United States, is studying here, probably will have kids here, who knows. So it's very, very important that we start these conversations now, and also so that we can build our communities in ways that are going to be inclusive, in not only providing economic opportunities, educational opportunities, but just the basic living lives, living environments. Yeah, so that if I'm on the streets with song and we're just talking in some heated conversation about jollof rice from West Africa, and we have some Kenyans just talking about nyama choma, and the conversation is so heated up, for people to understand that we're not mad and angry at each other, we're not about to kill each other, we're just being passionate about what we're talking about.
Yeah.
So I have been there. I mean, I come from a tribe where the women are, they're called the Bachika women from southwestern Uganda. We tend to be loud sometimes, and we're passionate about what we're talking about. So I totally understand some of the things that you have shared. And also, I would have wanted to provide an opportunity. I don't want to keep you here long, but this is just the beginning. We can have another session again about things that we haven't explored today. But what is the take home for our viewers from today's conversation? Just briefly, each of you before we sign up. We'll start with McKenna.
I feel like my thing that I would say to viewers generally is just to start paying attention to things around you and just to general trends, and when people and look for those words that people use to cover up like other things, when they're like, oh, I don't like to walk that way because there's like, people are kind of loud there, like loud means black, like those are black people and you're afraid to walk by them, like just like, and like don't be afraid to like have conversations and like to like actively, and you can also like ask people like, what are things that I have done that have made you uncomfortable, and like, but no black person is like has to respond to you if you ask them to it's not our jobs to educate like white people. There are a lot of books, you can look it up, like there are a lot of like different ways you can educate yourself, but like just have conversations and just like look around you, because like racism and like a lot of different structures just exist everywhere, and just like don't be so defensive when you're having conversations, like listen to people, and it's not just I hear you, it's listening and taking in and understanding and processing what people are telling you.
All right, and Eden?
I would definitely go off that point. I would say like don't be afraid to call people out and let them know that you're uncomfortable with the words that they're using, and definitely just watch out, like McKenna said as well.
David?
Racism is very blatant and it still exists everywhere, more than I actually like expected, like especially hearing about like Acton's high school, like their whole cafeteria scene there, and I'm just surprised to see like that's still happening, and I want to see some change.
And Nasra?
I would just say support your Black people, support your Black friends. Try to check up on them, because try to just talking to them, like just I guess having a better understanding. If you have questions, don't feel like you're such a burden on us. Like just ask. If you have any questions about what we go through, just ask. Like, and it never hurts. It makes us want you to think like, hey, like you're actually trying. You're trying to educate yourself on this, and it makes us feel better a little bit. That's what I would say.
Keenan?
I would say for anyone watching this, the biggest takeaway they should take is racism is very nuanced. Don't be afraid of having that conversation, and you need to learn how to educate yourself on the dark undertones of conversations that you might be having with people who don't understand what they're saying. So when you are having that conversation with a conservative, understand that they're speaking from a place of a lack of information and that they want to learn, but they just don't know how. So understand that.
some solutions that I thought wouldn't be too difficult for the school and the town to implement really immediately, just in pursuing racial equality, would be, I remember in high school taking U.S. history, we spent as much time on the Tulsa Race Massacre as Ronald Reagan's Star Wars program. So I think it would be, there's clearly like an emphasis on white American history, and I think it would be beneficial for every student to learn about more than just white American history. Especially since every student at AB and everyone in this country understands that black people as a whole in the U.S. hold much less wealth than white people as a whole, and so when students don't understand the reasons for that and why that is, I think students and kids just start to form the idea that black people must be inferior and white people must be superior, which is an issue. I also think a solution to the racial equality we see in our own state is encouraging political participation. Only 18% of registered voters voted in the election held in Acton a week ago, this June, but it doesn't seem like the town government is interested in increasing voter turnout, which I think is kind of strange. It doesn't seem like the town government is interested in increasing political participation, in advertising town meetings, in making town politics and state politics as accessible and clear as possible. So I think if that was done and we had more people involved, then it would definitely be to the benefit of our town and of our state.
Kubura and then Song.
I'd have to say that, and just based off of everything everyone else has said, definitely that racism is very an uncomfortable topic, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't talk about it. And AB itself, and as a school and a community, it definitely, from hearing all these voices, our viewers should know that there's a change that needs to be made, and that we should just tackle it for what it is and stop like trying to beat around the bush and not have these conversations because they're uncomfortable. They just things need to be said and need to be changed.
From me, I would say, I think the biggest takeaway to like from the black viewers, especially in like the age that we are in high school, I would say like just keep on like own your stuff, just keep on being exactly who you are. Don't let the people who like are trying to change how you act, like stereotype you, all the biases, make you stop doing the things you love or stop like standing up for yourself. I think that's the biggest thing, and Eden and McKenna said it, like just keep the conversation open, keep it flowing, like talk about all the things that you want to talk about in race, in class, bring it up, don't be scared, all that stuff. But to white viewers, I think that it's important to educate yourself completely, because I think that most of the stuff that we've talked about today just comes from a lack of education and just like ignorance of people just not wanting to educate themselves, not knowing how. And like there's so many different ways, like social media, although we talked about the dark side, I've seen people posting a lot of really good content that I hadn't even seen, and I was like, wow, this is really interesting. Obviously double check that, because sometimes it's not the right information. But and then like books and other ways that you can find information, it's just important to educate.
Well, I must say there is a lot that we have talked about during this session: the performance activism, what people can do, how people can listen, how schools can restructure. And so this is just the beginning of the conversations. And I want to thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for trusting me with this, with your experiences, and for being willing to share your experiences with, and also some thoughts for the next steps with the community. And I'm thinking of possibly having another forum that could include some Caucasian participants, maybe also Asian, so that it's diverse, and we just kind of share notes, exchange notes, and they could ask you questions and then you answer them, because I am not a Caucasian, so I do not have I cannot ask you the questions that they probably have. So we'll have a moment, a day that we could make that happen. And then hopefully you guys will be willing and to participate in that, because I think that is how we will make change, by opening up this conversation to people on either side. But this was an excellent moment for just us as Africans, as a people of color, just putting it out there in the raw form for the community to consume. So thank you again for being my guests, and wish you the very best in school, and to those who are out in the Song and I think Eden are going to college. Good luck with college. For those who are out of college, good luck with the job search. We're going to have to brainstorm, ways of integrating into our workforce. Maybe that will be another conversation. And for those in high school, still in high school, hey, we're here. And if you need support system, I would like to offer myself. I'm an Acton resident, so I can always, I'm always available if you need a Black voice, or I'm a parent. I can discipline you the same way your mamas discipline you. But anyway, on the brighter side, I'm here to help in any way that I can. So to the viewers, if you want to learn more about what we do in this community or our youth, you can always reach out to us through ActonTV. And thank you for watching. Till next time.